Good morning, beautiful children, and welcome back to the next chapter of the Birchbark House. The Birchbark House, as we remember, is a story about a little girl named Omachias. It's about Omachias and her family, and they live in up by Michigan, what we call Michigan today. Omachias is a Native American, and this will tell the story of her and her family well before or while before white men um, had settled the area. So um, we learned yesterday that Omachias has an older brother or an older sister named Angelina. She has a mother and a father, and she has a little brother named Pinch, who's annoying, and then a sweet baby, and then Omachias' 7-year-old girl. At the end of the chapter yesterday, her mother sent Omachias to Old Tallow. Old Tallow is a woman who lives in town. And you will remember at the very first of the story yesterday, we read a little bit about a little girl who was found alone on an island. Um, and this man that was in the story was talking about he knew he would send his wife back, and his wife's name was Tallow, and she was fierce, and she scared him sometimes, but she was courageous, and he admired that too. So today we're going to learn more about Tallow. This chapter is chapter 2, called Old Tallow. And Okomias is going to get scissors that mother had lent to her. Although she lived in town, Old Tallow was so isolated by the force and strangeness of her personality that she could not have been surrounded by a huge dark forest, or that she could have been surrounded by a huge dark forest, even though she lived in town. She had never had any children, and each of her 3 husbands had slunk off in the dark of the night, never to be seen again. Nobody knew exactly what it was that Tallow, in her younger days, had done to drive them off. It had probably been something terrible. After the last husband left, her face seemed to have gotten old suddenly, though the rest of her hadn't weakened one bit. She was a rangy woman, over 6 feet tall. She was powerful and lean, thin, and she lived surrounded by ferocious animals that were more wolf than dogs, and they were all fiercely devoted to her. Now, Old Tallow could bring down a bear with her pack of dogs, her gun, or even a razor-sharp spear that she practiced throwing into the splintered base of a tree. The dogs were bull tough, and the yellow one, particularly, showed its wolf origins in the springy length of its legs. Now, for some reason, Old Tallow seemed to treat her, Okomias, somewhat differently than she did the other children. She didn't scream at her, or heap disdain on her, or order her away from her cabin, or set her dogs out on her. No, Okomias thought perhaps it was because Old Tallow respected her mamma and her grandma. Old Tallow respected almost nobody. So that was extra meaningful that she was nice to her. Now the 3 women often sat together talking in the dusk, Mamma, Grandma, and Old Tallow. Also, Old Tallow, who loved to hunt and was very skilled, shared her catch with them when Day was gone. They would sometimes wake to find a deer sitting waiting for them outside their door, or a fresh killed piece of bear meat, or a fish or 2. In fact, she now remembered that Old Tallow was responsible for the hide of moose which she had shared, that she was supposed to help skin. Old Tallow liked to make her deliveries late at night, which was another thing. Most other people hated to go out in the dark when Grandfather Owl was calling, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo," and anything could happen late at night in the dark. But of course, Old Tallow was afraid of nothing, and so she went out at night. Now, Okomias approached Tallow's cabin warily because of those dogs. She stood for a moment at the end of the trail, gathering her confidence before she rounded the corner. One dog in particular seemed to hate her. It was the big yellow one. Okomias was careful not to startle him or gaze too long into his mean, clouded eyes. Once he had snapped at her, and he had torn a sleeve of her dress. There he stood now to bar her way into Tallow's door. Okomias pulled up all of her courage, breathed calmly, and she walked forward, shoving him aside as though she had not a care for his dripping teeth. She got ready to deliver a good hard kick if he lunged at her, and she walked right past him without showing any fear. The dog bristled at her, baring his teeth in an ugly snarl, but he did let her pass. The other dogs, the black and the brown with the lopped-off tail, the small whitish one, and the droopy orange runt, merely looked alert and regarded her with no interest at all. Old Tallow's cabin was small. It was neat, thickly mudded between the logs. There was a log bench inside the door, and sure enough, old Tallow sat upon it smoking her pipe. A fragrant curl of sweet tobacco smoke stirred from the red stone bowl. As though she had known Okomias was coming for the precious scissors, old Tallow had them sitting right there on her lap, safe in the beaded, decorated pouch of the red trade wool that Mamma had made specially for her scissors. "Abanine, you little skinny one," she growled. Old Tallow's legs stuck out like poles. Tattered moccasins flapped on her wagging feet as she drew impatiently upon her pipe. She tamped the bowl of the pipe with huge hands. Her arms were long. The old blue dress that she wore was trimmed with the teeth of fox at the collar, beaded halfway around the scraggly, ripped hem. Tallow, in her galloping hunts through the woods, was hard on her clothes and wore out her moccasins quickly, one pair right after the next. Even now, a toe stuck out from one of her ripped seams on her moccasins. She tucked her braid up underneath her man's hat that she wore, a white man's hat with a heavy brim. She was hardly seen without it, even in her own house. In the band of that hat she always wore a little gold-shaped feather. There was the feather of the gold-breasted woodpecker, the bird that gave its name to the island. "You want the scissors?" Her voice was abrupt, but it was not unkind. "Yes," said Okomias, glad that old Tallow was outside. The yellow dog knew it was wrong to intimidate Okomias. Sure enough, old Tallow scolded him. "You!" she shrieked at the snarling dog. "Go away! Move! Move! Leave her alone! This is your last warning. Touch her and I will kill you." The yellow dog turned aside, shrugging and cringing mean-spiritedly, eyeing Okomias. She imagined she heard the yellow dog say, "I'll get you next time, little girl. Just wait until there's the two of us. You'll see." Relieved, Okomias walked past other dogs, straight up to the old woman, and stood before her. "Ah, Auntie," she said. She wished the old woman good health and called her Auntie, because it was a sign of affection, though Okomias was really not exactly sure how she felt. After she'd spoken, she stood politely waiting. Old Tallow smiled, nodded, and blew past a smoke out of her nostrils. Then she put her hand into the pouch on her waist. She rummaged around for a bit, and then suddenly she drew forth a small grime-colored lump of maple sugar, rock hard and wonderful. "You take this," she said, her voice cracked and dry as though salted. "And this, too." She handed Okomias the scissors, waved her back into the trail, and as this was as friendly as old Tallow ever got, Okomias went away satisfied. Before she went back on the trail, Okomias rinsed off the old candy lump in the lake. It came out beautifully, creamy, golden, translucent and grainy dark, and sweet. She started walking, her treasure now trapped in a leaf. As she walked, Okomias thought, there was no way to share such a tough nut of sweetness. How would she divide it? Okomias decided she did not want to cause trouble at home. Furthermore, it suddenly made sense to her that at least one person in the family should get the full effect of the maple sugar. So she would pop the whole thing into her mouth all at once. This would save the problems. Ah, The lump was delicious, tasting of spring sweetness and the inside of trees. Besides, Okomayas reasoned, as she walked contentedly along, the taste of the sugar would save her from eating every one of the berries that she was sure to find on the path. Okomayas's feet moved slower and even slower yet. For one thing, the moose hide was waiting for her. For another, she was still angry with her older sister and didn't want to see Angeline. She could still feel that sister foot pressing down on her back. If only there were some way to impress Angeline, to cause her envy, to make her say, "Oh, can I please have some of your berries? Please, please, please." Ah, you can be sure, Okomayas thought, her face taking on a faraway, haughty expression, she would be slow in answering. Well, perhaps. Yet the worst of it was this. Her sister was usually on her side, helping her plan tricks on the other children in the village, or gathering new ferns, or snaring rabbits, visiting the grave houses looking for sugar, or food left in the spirits for the spirits, tossing off her clothes to swim with her, and to have her older sister laugh at her. Why, it just hurt Okomayas so much inside that she both wanted Angeline to smile in surprise, to be proud, and to envy her, and to feel absolutely rotten and sorry for ever putting her foot on her back. So Okomayas took the slow way back, looking for the little red heartberries in the sunny margins of the woods near the ground. She carefully removed the hard lump of sweetness from her mouth, stuck it back into the leaf just inside the pocket of her dress, and just as the taste of maple syrup faded along her tongue, she bent over, pushed back delicate leaves, and found masses of plump red little berries. Ah, 1, 2, 3. She'd eaten a huge handful. Another, she grinned, thinking she'd allow her sister to return with her to plunder them, but only if Angeline changed her ways. All of a sudden there was a rustle, then a thump in a bush ahead, and it made Okomayas freeze. A long moment passed as she stared through the dark leaves. Suddenly, crash! Two bear cubs burst from the bush and rushed pell-mell, tumbling head over heels straight for her. They came on in such a hurry that they didn't see Okomayas until they were nearly in her lap, and then, with comical looks of shock on their faces, they tried to stop themselves. One flew flat on its face, bumping its nose and squealing. The other twisted in midair and landed in a heap on the ground, shaking its head in confusion, looking at Okomayas. The bear boys looked at her. Slowly, she put out her open hand filled with heartberries. Curious, the cubs jumped forward and lost their nerve. They scampered backwards and then crept forward shyly again. The smaller cub seemed slightly bolder and sniffed at Omakaya's hand. The bear cub took one berry, then jumped away, seeming to be scared at his bold act. But the taste of that berry seemed to banish any fear that he had. The two now tumbled at her, growling, mock ferocious. Their long pink tongues touched up every berry from her hand, eagerly flicking them from her fingers as fast as she could pick. They seemed to like the game. It could have gone on for hours, that is, until she stood upright. Then they tumbled backward in complete alarm. Their chubby bottoms rolled them over like bouncing balls, and she laughed out loud. She realized that they hadn't thought Okomayas was their own. She realized that they had thought Okomayas was their own size. They were astonished, the same way Okomayas had been the first time she saw the trader unfold a seeing glass, something he called a telescope, a long shiny tube that grew in his hands. She bent down again. "Little brothers," she said to them kindly, and then came forward. She looked around. No mother bear. Okomayas was well aware that she shouldn't stay too close to those cubs, but after all, they seemed deserted. She looked around. They were orphans. Perhaps the mother's bare skin was now draped across old Tallow's bed, although she hadn't heard about any recent bear kills. But still no mother bear was in sight, and these little ones, so hungry, Wouldn't her big sister be thrilled when Okomias returned with these two new brothers? Eagerly, Okomias began to plan out her triumphant walk back to the house. She would enter the little clearing with the cubs, one at her heels and one before her. Everyone would make way, impressed. Oh my! She would lead the bear cubs around the fire 4 times before she presented one of them to Angeline, who would look at her with new respect. Now there was no warning. One moment Okomias was wiggling a leafy stick, making it move on the ground so that the cubs would jump on it, biting fiercely. The next moment she found herself flipped over on her back and pinned underneath a huge, powerful, heavy thing that sent down a horrible smell. It was the sow bear, the mother bear, breathing on her stale breath of decayed old deer hides and skunk cabbages and dead mushrooms. Ugh! The surprising thing was, Okomias realized later that although she had no memory of doing so, she had the scissors out of the case and open, in the sharp ends pointing at the mother bear's heart. She didn't use them as a knife. She knew for certain that she should not move. If the bear began to bite and claw, she would have to plunge the tip of the scissors straight in between the bear's strong ribs, use all of her strength, and sink the blade all the way into the rounded hilt, and then jump clear. If she could, while the bear went through its death agony. If she couldn't get clear, Okomias knew that she would have to roll up in a ball and endure the bear's anger. She would probably be clawed from head to toe, bitten to pieces, scattered all over the ground, until the mother bear made the first move. Okomias knew she would have to stay still, or as still as possible, given the terrified jumping of her heart. Now for long moments the bear tested her with every sense, staring down with her weak eyes, listening, and most of all smelling her. The bear smelled the morning's moose meat stew Okomias had eaten. The bear smelled the morning's meat stew that Okomias had eaten, the wild onion seasoning and the dusty bit of maple sugar from old tallow that was stuck inside her pocket. How she hoped the bear did not smell the bear-killing dogs or the bear claw that swung on a silver hoop from old Tallow's earlobe. Perhaps the bear smelled the kind touch of Grandma and Mamma's bone and spruce wood comb, her baby brother's cuddling body, the skins and the mats that she slept in, and little Pinch, who had whined and sobbed the night before. The bear smelled on Okomias's skin, the smell of its own cousin bear's grease used to ward off mosquitoes. Fish from the night before the last evening, the berries she was eating. The bear smelled all. Okomias couldn't help but smell back. Bears eat anything, and this one had just eaten something ancient and foul. Hoo-wee! Okomias took shallow breaths. Perhaps it was to take her mind off the scent of the dead things in the bear's mouth that he had eaten and the horrible breath that he now had. Accidentally, she closed the scissors, shearing off a tiny clip of the bear fur, and then, to cover her horror at the mistake, started to talk. "Nokomias," she said to the bear, calling her grandmother, "I didn't mean any harm. I was only playing with your children. Please forgive me." The bear cuffed at Okomias, but in a warning manner, not savagely to hurt. Then the bear leaned back, nose working, as though she could scent the meaning of the human words. Encouraged, Okomias continued, "I fed them some berries. I wanted to bring them home, to adopt them. Have them live with me at my house with my little brothers. But now that you're here, grandmother, I will leave quietly. These scissors in my hands are not for killing, just for sewing. They're nothing compared to your teeth or your claws." And indeed, Okomia's voice trembled slightly as the bear made gurgling sounds deep in her throat and bared her long, curved, yellowish teeth, so good at ripping and tearing. But having totaled up all of the smells and sifted them for information, the bear seemed to have decided that Okomias was not a threat. She sat back on her haunches like a huge dog, Swinging her head around, she gave a short, quick slap at one of the cubs that sent it reeling from Okomias. It was as though she were telling them that they had done wrong to approach this human animal, and should stay away from them. Okomias' heart squeezed painfully, and even though it was clear that her life was to be spared, she felt the loss of the new brothers that she'd found in the forest. I would never hurt them, she said again. The little cubs piled against their mother, clung to her, and for a long moment the great bear sat calmly with them, deciding where to go. Then, in no hurry, they rose in one piece of dark fur. One bear boy broke away, again tried to go near Okomias. The other looked longingly at her, but the big bear mother abruptly nosed them down the trail. And that is the end of that chapter. Oh my goodness, children, can you imagine if you ran into a bear? Would you be so brave? I don't know that I could be. I think Okomias was very lucky. Did you notice that when Okomias was talking to the bear, she called her grandmother, right? Because if you are Native American and she Native American believed that all things are related. So often they call animals grandmother or aunt, right? So when she was speaking to the bear, she was speaking to her as if she were grandmother bear. I am wondering why the bear did not eat her or do more damage. I think Okomias was very lucky. Okay, my dear children, tomorrow we're going to read a chapter called The Return. I wonder what will I wonder if this is about Okomias' return with the scissors. I am not sure. We will read tomorrow and find out more about Okomias and her family. Have a wonderful day.